Welcome to Podcast and Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Nowadays, sustainable finance is growing every day, but the question is, how important is it to invest in companies that have a positive impact on the world? In this episode, I have as a guest Bertrand Gacon, the founder and CEO of Impact, a company based in Switzerland. Impact is a collaborative platform relying on collective intelligence to produce research and assessment of the social and environmental impact of companies. Its mission is to bring impact analysis to the heart of all investment decisions so that capital can be directed to the businesses that have the best possible impact on the planet and society. Bertrand, it is a pleasure to have you as a guest on my podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Juan Carlos. It's a pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
Bertrand, today we will talk about a fascinating and important topic in the world of sustainability and ESG related to investment, especially to the companies we interact with every day and how they impact people and the planet. But first of all, I would like to start this conversation with the following question. What are the benefits of ESG data?
Yeah, very important question. And if I may, I will maybe make a distinction between ESG data and impact data, because that's a very important topic for a practitioner like me. Usually, when people hear about ESG data, they hear about sustainability. But in fact, there's really two dimensions when you want to measure sustainability. The first one is what we call the outside in. And what we try to find out is whether the environment can have an impact on the company. This is, of course, of importance for the investors and the shareholders because they want to know whether they are at risks of losing their investment. And most of the ESG data that has been produced these last 20 years is about that single dimension, is about identifying risks for the investors. And it's really a very different question from the impact data, which is, looking at the other question, the inside out question is whether the company is having an impact on the planet and society. And for many people, the really interesting question is the second one, is really whether the company is positively contributing to the planet and society. But that is not what ESG data is usually answering. So just to be sure, we're talking about the same thing. ESG data, again, is outside in, and impact data is inside out. Now, there are benefits in both types of data.
Okay.
Again, the first one is more for investors willing to know whether their investments are at risk. And the second one, the impact data, is more for, I would say, the common citizen, that wants to understand.
Stakeholders.
Stakeholders, exactly. The first one is for shareholders, the other one is for stakeholders. Is really to be able to understand whether these companies are bringing a positive or negative contribution to the planet. And that in itself is a very important question. It's important because businesses today, they probably account for 80% of all the impact that we have on the planet and society. They are the operating agent of humanity. Everything we consume, everything we produce at one point in time goes through a corporate, it goes through a business. So if we want to change the impact we have on the planet, we need to change the way business operate. And to do that, we need to understand and measure their impact. So starting with measurement is the very first step in the whole process of transforming the economy.
Certainly, I totally agree with you. I think a good investment strategy is critical in these times because companies or stakeholders, as you mentioned, looking for companies to are creating positive and social or environmental, impact. My next question, Bertrand, what is the best way to invest in companies that, have positive impact in the world? Because right now, something like can see as a lot of greenwashing, green wishing, plenty of green terms, that can have negative impact in the world. So what is the best way to impact in companies that really is working towards reduction of the carbon emissions and etc.? What is your opinion about that?
And I think you're putting your fingers on something which is really crucial, is the fact that there is not one single definition of what is a good sustainable companies. And the reason for that is because it really depends on what are your priorities, what are your conviction as an investor. Let me give you an example. If you're very, I would say, worried or concerned with climate change, then the champion, the more sustainable companies providing solution on that front are going to be very different from the one, for instance, that are providing healthcare services or education services or gender equality or so on. So it's very important that you first decide what are the most important issues before you can really find out who are the most aligned businesses, aligned companies to invest in. And this is something that is not happening today in the financial world. What we have today is the banks are deciding what is a sustainable or not so sustainable company, and that leads to a lot of accusation of greenwashing, because the scoring system that the banks are using might not fully align with your own set of values as a private investors. Maybe the bank would decide that biodiversity is the most important topic, and so they will apply this grid to their scoring system, and they come up with a very different list of companies than the one you would have picked yourself as a private investors. So to turn around that challenge, there's only two ways. Either you only invest through thematic fund, because then you can align the views of the bankers with the views of the investors. Let's say you're interested in the topic of plastic pollution. The bank has developed a circular economy type of fund. Then there's alignment there. But a
Mhm.
very, very large proportion of all the investment made on the planet today are made through diversified funds, ETFs, passive management. They are not thematic funds. Thematic funds is only a few percent of all the investments. And when you start going into that direction, then you start using again the grid that the banks has defined, which is not your own grids. So when that happens,
Mhm.
the only way of really realigning with you is to use the system where it's really the end client defining the different weights. And then based on that, the sustainability research can be applied to say, okay, if you, Juan Carlos, you consider that climate change should be 30% of the weight, and biodiversity 20%, and gender equality 10%, and so on and so forth, then I can tell you what are the best companies to invest in. But only when I have captured that information, I'm really able to provide you with a satisfying answer. And this is what we do
Yeah.
at Impact.
No, no, yes, we will talk later about that. Yeah, to me, it's like as you know, it's very important that the stakeholder, for example, like you mentioned, me myself, for example, is important to know what the companies are doing. In this market of challenging market of green investment or sustainable finance. You know, um, and nowadays many investors would like to see how companies perform. So there are two terms, right, to analyze this kind of perform of each company or our favorite company or what we're familiar with, that are scores and ratings.
Mhm.
But I am not in the financial, I am not a financial expert, but I'm very interested in this field. And there are how you would suggest the companies use scores instead of ratings, because people say that ratings are the most valid in terms of investment, and scores means another things. What is your opinion? Why is that?
Yeah, well, I have to say those two words usually are used interchangeably in the industry. So I'm not sure there's always a strict definition of what people call scores and what people call ratings.
I see.
Normally, scores are more they're following a proprietary methodology where the bank, for instance, will develop their own scoring system and apply their own assessments. Whether
Mhm.
ratings is supposed to be a more open approach where a larger pool of raters come together to define, a collective scores. So that might be one of the differences. But I have to say that the most important difference is not really between scores and ratings, but it's really
Yeah.
between metrics on one side, which really are
Mhm.
the hard facts, the tons of CO2 being emitted by a company, the number of jobs being created, and how you turn these many metrics that you have at the level of a company into a global score. And this is where
I
whether
see.
you score or ratings, this is where the tricky part starts to kick in, because it really depends how you will weight and integrate those different metrics to form a final global score for the company.
That's interesting point. But something that I read, I see in different papers, etc., that is essential to know the quality of the score of the rating. So Bertrand, you have years working in this field, and we know that even with the best technology, we can see some limitations because nothing is perfect. So, what are the limitations of, in this case, ESG scores? For example, I see or I read that, for example, there are lack of rules or or transparency regulations, you know, different kind of you know criteria, etc. So, what is your opinion? What are some limitations that ESG scores have or has
There are many.
currently?
Yeah, there are many flows in the most of the ESG scores that you can find
Yeah,
around there. The first one I would mention is the one I already pointed to at the beginning of this session. Is really the fact that ESG is about measuring the outside in only. So it
yeah,
doesn't answer the question whether is that company positively contributing to the land and society. You know, we had this controversy with Mr. Musk being upset because one of the leading providers of ESG scores, Standards and Poor's, they classified Tesla as a worse company than Exxon, right? And he couldn't understand why an EV, a manufacturer would get a worse score. But again, ESG is not measuring your positive impact on the planet. Is measuring whether the environment might be, representing a risk for your company. So that's a different question, and that's the really for me the major flow. There are many others. The second biggest one probably is the divergence that we see among the various data providers. You ask the same question to MSCI, S&P, ISS, Sustainalytics, you get a different answer. They use the same data, but they get a different answer. Why is that so? Because they use very different methodologies. They don't aggregate in the same way. They don't give the same weighting. Many reasons, but at the end of the day, it's not making capital allocation very efficient, because if you work with one of these providers or if you work with another one, then you will not invest in the same companies. And then at the end of the day, capital is not moving to the most sustainable companies because nobody is able to define which one is the most sustainable company. And there's also a few other issues, the lack of comparability sometimes. You get some companies disclosing on some of these metrics, some other do not. So it's very hard to make a decision when you only have half of the companies reporting on this data. So yeah, there's a very large number of issues. Overall, a lot of progress has been made in the last 15 years. Regulation, and particularly in Europe, is really helping. Now they're imposing some minimum disclosure requirements to companies so that we have more standardization happening. But yes, it will still take a number of years before all of this scoring system becomes more reliable.
that's interesting. If the companies, like you mentioned right now, standardize all the methodologies, will be a much better scoring systems or rating systems. Bertrand, when we were working and discussing about this podcast enough during our emails, you mentioned something to me was very interesting. There is a gap between sustainable investment and what banks are offering. What are those gaps? Can you elaborate a little bit, please?
Of course, yeah, that's this was my frustration as a client advisor for the last 20 years. I was facing clients having some very strong conviction about what they call a green investment, and I was proposing them products that did not align with what they had, because all the time as a bank we were trying to impose our views on sustainability to our clients, and that is not working. I might have my own personal conviction that says, for example, I don't know, as I already mentioned, climate change is the mother of every battle, and this has to be the defining issue when you score a company. You look at their climate footprint, and this is what is going to drive the score. But some clients would have a different view on that. Some clients would say no, biodiversity is more important. Some of them would say no, fighting poverty is the key issue, and so you cannot. The end result of that is that every single time you try to build a product and you turn to your client with that product, you have 9 times out of 10 you are wrong, because if you haven't asked your clients beforehand what are their conviction, then there's a very high probability that what you decided is not going to align with your clients. So we really need to reverse the whole process and start the scoring system, inform the scoring system from the client's priorities, client's own personal convictions. And if we do so, then we do establish products that really fully align with the clients, and we avoid all of the the situation of perceived greenwashing that we have today, where people don't understand why again Exxon is a more sustainable or should be a more sustainable company than Tesla.
That's a really good point. Now let's talk about company impact. What is impact? What you guys are doing? You have a very interesting impact score methodology. I just checking the new report and something that I really like it. It's like you guys spotlight the SDG, you know, which is are essential for this kind of sustainable finance. So how is impact as a tool? How can help customers or consumers or leads or people who want to know where the money goes?
Yeah, and that's the whole mission of Impact is exactly to do what I mentioned, is to give the power back to the end clients and to let them decide what topics really matter to them, and based on that and on the research we produce, to be able to, well, direct them towards the companies that really align with their own personal conviction. And so what we've been created in the last 4 years is really that collaborative platform where we don't let the bank decide for you what is a sustainable company. We have that 60,000 people working together to document the impact of research, document, analyze the impact of business. So we collect the data, we analyze all of these facts, but we do that collectively as a community. And then we derive personal scores for every member of the community. And then they can use that to really make a much better informed decision about who is doing a good job outside, out there among the companies. What are their impacts? So we have, of course, all of the metrics. We capture all of the metrics of impact, but then we also turn these metrics into scores, again, based on every and single personal convictions of our members. And that is what is really making the difference. So it's no longer the banks deciding for you, it's really you deciding for your own investments.
That's great. And Bertrand, you just mentioned the work community. Um, how they are responding when you interact with them, when you ask something, how they feel, how they see any kind of fast return in terms of their money, any experience that we would like to share about them. Would you mind to share any kind of experience?
Absolutely. It has been amazing. I mean, when we started, one of the first things we did was to create a free training on what is impact, how do you measure that, what kind of data do you need, because we needed the people to come coming on the platform to be to provide meaningful contribution, to also work in a coordinated way. And this training has been just a huge success. So we trained more than 350,000 people on impact analysis. And we have now a very dynamic, vibrant, engaged community. So it's always a pleasure to interact with that community every single day. And they come to the platform because they really want to make sure that their pension funds, their individual investment, the saving plans are really aligned with what they believe in, and make sure that their money is really used to make this world a better place. And that is what is really the main motivation for people joining the platform. It's entirely free for people. We want to accelerate the transformation of the broader economy. There are a lot of business opportunities, but we need money to go into those companies that are providing the solutions to the main challenges we're facing. And in the best position to identify these companies, again, I'm sorry to repeat, I used to be a banker myself, but they're not the bankers. They don't have the legitimacy, they don't have the skills, they don't even have the right mindset to do that. The right people to understand the really deep impact on the planet and society are the people actually, living these impacts, suffering from this impact. So it's really global civil society, and we need global civil society, each and every of us, to really take the lead and decide for themselves where the money should be going to.
No, that just it's very interesting that you mentioned. It's like the core of the impact is a collaborative platform. It's really important that has this mission to provide like a very, let's see, important and quality information. Hey, Bertrand, where people can contact you? I read the report of your company. It's very easy to read to learn what is the goal of your company. Where people can contact you or have more information about impact.
Well, the best way is to go to our website. It's www.impact, IMPAAKT, so double AKT.com. This is where you will find all of the information and already a huge number of impact analyses, research notes on the many impact that businesses have on the world available for free on the platform. So go there, educate yourself, learn, and join the community. We'd be happy to have you on board.
That's great. Bertrand, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, well, a big thank you to you, Juan Carlos, for organizing this podcast. I really fully enjoyed listening to the previous, and I'm sure I will always I will keep enjoying listening to the future ones. So well done.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Bertrand, for your time. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone.